Okie dokie. So part of Abundant Montana's mission is to build a more resilient and reliable Montana food system. And part of that is increasing Montanans' access to nutrient dense food. So today we will hear from Crystal and Jody Manuel on why that's important and how it relates to Montana agriculture. Crystal, like an increasing number of others, found herself in a health crisis. Her healing journey brought a new perspective on more than just her own health. This led her and her husband Jody on a transformative agrarian journey. As they began to heal themselves, they discovered the connections between farming, food, and human health. Today, we get to hear Crystal's story and the practical steps she and Jody took in transitioning their farm and ranch to regenerative organic, and how this transition has improved their family's health, their business, and their community. Um, and just a couple things. I think this can be a dynamic conversation as Crystal and Jody share with us. So if you have any questions, feel free to just pop them in the chat and we can maybe stop partway through. And we'll leave some time for questions at the end too. But without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Crystal and Jody.
Well, thank you. We're always glad to have a conversation around food and farming with like-minded people, and just to kind of share and just to stay in community with that. I think most of you probably heard me talking at the beginning, but Jody and I are in the process of doing a TEDx talk, an opportunity that presented itself. We don't know where the talk will be yet. We anticipate that it will probably be sometime this fall, but we don't know where yet. You put in applications at several places and then you get chosen. The difference between a TEDx talk and a TED talk are the TEDx talks are more community driven.
They can be locally focused and
yeah.
Locally organized for sure. Yeah.
There appears to be quite a few that we would fit into because we can speak to both farming practices, which lends to environmental issues, the way that we do it, as well as wellness and health and consumers and food as medicine, that kind of thing. It's just sort of a hot topic at the moment. So we're hoping really just to utilize the opportunity to share awareness and education for people, because I think ultimately at the end of the day, consumer education just needs to be more expansive. And I think people want to do better. So many consumers want to do better, but to do better, you have to know better. And food is a confusing topic for so many, especially who are in health crisis and coming to the conclusion that I did, where you just have to learn how to navigate it and maybe even learn how to read a label, like actually, and understand what it means. And so we're just happy to be part of that in whatever small way that we can be. But if you don't mind, I think that it means I'm going to be looking a little sideways, but I'm just going to kind of read, maybe not all, but at least follow along for some of the parts.
I mean, it tells the whole story, top to bottom. So and
just read it.
It doesn't take very long.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll just do that then. We'll just read you what we wrote. It kind of hops back and forth between the two of us. TED Talks are not usually dual, but there are sometimes. And so we were excited to have opportunity to do it. And this is not, okay. This isn't going to be the final draft, but you'll get an idea where we're currently at. Okay. Well, it starts like this. Our lives are interesting mosaics pieced together by a variety of choices and decisions that are made as we navigate our journey. 28 years ago, I never could have imagined the interesting adventure that we were about to embark upon. Sickness has a way of shaking life up, but it can have a happy ending. This story begins with what seemed like a simple question, followed by a simple answer. What causes an autoimmune disease? We don't know. The response was so hopeless. What was next for me? Couldn't I change something for the better? I had to dig deeper. It seemed obvious to me that my symptoms were merely an effect. But what was the cause? Why was I suffering? While blanketed with physical unpleasantries of my sickness, I was unable to realize that something amazing was happening. My sickness was literally promoting the gestation of new ideology. Everything I thought I knew about food and farming was about to change, and a series of serendipitous life events was about to begin. I didn't yet get that our findings would lead to the regeneration of our multi-generational farm and ranch operation, that one day we would purchase Montana's oldest food company and then launch a new startup that would quickly win a coveted Nexty Award in the best new regenerative/organic product category. And best of all, that we would become holistic food and farm educators with the opportunity to help others navigate their wellness journeys. This required choices to be made that would then impact every day after. What we don't often realize in those pivotal moments is that the choices will also have a ripple effect upon others. You see, I didn't yet realize that saying no to the intentional demise of my thyroid gland would eventually lead to so many meaningful outcomes. We live one day after the next, and they seem relatively similar, except for a few. It was 1997, and suddenly I was very sick with a plethora of symptoms. I remember rocking our baby and watching my shirt visibly move due to my rapid heartbeat. My temperature would flare as a result, and my body responded by incinerating calories, which led to a weight loss of 35 pounds by the end of the first month. In addition to weight, I also lost a significant amount of hair, and my body temperature would not regulate. The afternoon before my first doctor's appointment, I felt desperate. Shaken and teary, I walked down the hall to lay my infant daughter down for her nap, and when I caught a glimpse of a book on the shelf that piqued my curiosity. With Sarah soundly sleeping in her crib, I picked up the book, A Nutritional Guide to Prescription Eating. It was an unread wedding gift from my hippie aunt, who was always talking about food as medicine and other crazy things. I sat down at the kitchen table, and with our 2-year-old bouncing about, I began to flip through the pages, and I began to notice that it gave the name and description of symptoms for ailments and listed foods to both avoid and consume. Flipping one page at a time, I finally found my symptoms on page 211, and I discovered the name of my eerie autoimmune disease, Graves', which is a hyperthyroid condition. However, even more shocking to me than the name of my condition was the response to reading the word cabbage, which was listed under the foods to eat. It was such a bizarre experience. Have you ever craved cabbage with severity? It was a shocking response, but within an hour, I had bought, steamed, and consumed an entire head of it and enjoyed the most simple, nourishing, satiating meal that I have still ever experienced. I would visit with 3 different doctors over the course of the next 2 weeks to learn that the standard treatment for Graves' was to essentially surgically or chemically remove the butterfly-shaped gland from my neck, resulting in the need for a lifelong prescription. To the dismay and disbelief of my husband and family, I refused to accept that option. I was still suffering, but immensely enjoying my round, leafy drug of choice. My mind was engaged, and I was excited about the proactive mindset that was kicking in. The third doctor was my charm, an internal medicine specialist who also believed that food could be medicine. Together, we agreed that if I would do as much as I could with intentional food choices, he would prescribe as minimal doses of medications as possible. My mind was a whirl, rethinking the functionality of food, and I simultaneously began to research the correlation between autoimmune diseases and agrochemicals. My recovery took 2 long years, but I completely healed from the disease, and I am happy to say that I still love cabbage. My doctor would tell me on my first visit, oh wait, that part I'm eliminating.
Then that's where I come in, right?
Yep.
With my wife's health now fully restored, I was forced into a space of intense self-reflection. If the experts would have had their way, we would now be living under the lifelong guidance of our local pharmacist. But instead, she chose to buck the system in a determined belief for something better. What I felt most awful about back then was my willingness to just trust and follow the experts. I now found myself in deep contemplation. What other widely accepted truths are out there that I had been just blindly following? I look back at this pivotal moment as the time where I learned how to be an outside the box thinker. It was incredibly ironic that my wife's restored health came at the behest of some organic produce. I knew a couple of organic farmers in our area, but all I'd ever been told was how crazy they were. Lunatics, weed farmers. Later that year, we saw an ad in our local ag paper for the annual convention of the Montana Organic Association being held 100 miles away in Great Falls. We couldn't get signed up fast enough. Attending that conference was the next pivotal moment for me. I had never been in the presence of so much innovation. Wild ideas were front and center. Ideas that reframed my own perspective on weeds, crop diversity, and even the integration of livestock into our own cropping system. Farming suddenly became fun. Being welcomed into this family of cutting-edge Montana farmers has opened up so many doors as well as minds. Living in the middle of wheat country, as we do, where literally all you can see for miles and miles are chem-fallowed wheat fields, we were suddenly introduced to all sorts of diverse and new crops, legumes, and ancient grains. Crops that can be used in very intentional rotations that are intended to work with nature to build soil as crops are grown. As growers of these niche crops, we have now gotten used to being sought out from companies that are attuned to the growing demand for healthy food. General Mills, Annie's, Dave's Killer Bread, Anheuser-Busch, Pearly Elizabeth, Patagonia Provisions, and Deschutes, to name a few. The last 2 decades have taught me the value of networking with more advanced regenerative farmers across the country as well as in Montana. Getting to meet, listen to, and speak firsthand with regenerative giants like Gabe Brown, Will Harris, and Rick Clark has truly shaped who we are as a farm and a family. It is this very networking that led us to the Land Institute in Salina, Kansas, where a plan was hatched to reinvent ourselves yet again, but in a way that builds upon our organic foundation. Since the spring of 2020, we have been in the process of converting all of our crop acres to a system of perennials featuring a revolutionary natural hybrid known as Kernza. Kernza is a perennial wheat that had been 3 decades in the development phase. It was now ready to enter the commercial market. Our farm seemed like a perfect launching pad for this soil building wonder. All organic cropping systems are required to adhere to soil building principles while excluding the use of prohibited substances such as pesticides and synthetic fertilizers. This new addition of perennials to our crop rotation brought something more to the table by nearly eliminating our reliance on mechanical tillage, which just happens to be one of the biggest challenges for fostering soil microbial life. What I have observed thus far in our own soils since implementing these perennials is a rapidly accelerated increase of soil organic matter. From the noticeable increased presence of earthworms, insects, birds, and wildlife to the overall sponginess of the ground as you walk across it, I know that I've found the system that works for us. We have come to see the unmistakable parallel between feeding our bodies in a healthy way and feeding our soils in a healthy way. There is a profoundly complex symbiotic circle between the life in our soil, the plants being grown, the grazing livestock and wildlife, to the overall nutrient density of the food that we ingest that interacts with our own physiology through the same shared microbial channels. What started as our own personal quest to heal Crystal's health revealed a far greater truth. The path to mending our broken food system runs straight through the fields that we've now reimagined. From our farm's living soil to the nation's dinner tables, this grassroots revolution is ready to take root, led by farmers, fueled by consumers, and grounded in the life we nurture below. The journey to fix our broken food system begins at the actual ground level. The lives of our communities, our families, our children are inextricably tied to the life in our soil. This literal grassroots movement requires farmers. Farmers are going to produce what we continue to consume, what we continue to demand. Today, thanks to our collective health crisis, we as a society stand at a dire precipice unique to our nation's history. Consumers are suddenly being granted a look behind the veil of our industrial food system and offered the opportunity to give a thumbs up or down, voting with their wallets. This is precisely the driving force needed to launch the foundational beginning of our nation's healing journey that will begin with our soil. Personal crisis is what brought about the transition to our lives and to our farm. It is very natural then for us to imagine a bold parallel from our society's current crisis of chronic illness. This promising vision of the future is one where farms across the nation engage in practices that put life and nutrient density ahead of yields. This vision sees consumers everywhere that are equipped with new knowledge that offers them all-around success in terms of their own health, mind, body, and spirit. This future celebrates food as medicine, whole ingredients over processing. This future unveils a society savoring the joy where the flavor of good food meets our deep tie to the living soil below. Wouldn't it be great if there were some simple first steps to make this future real together? Turns out there are. First, as the renowned Michael Pollan puts it, don't eat anything that your great-grandmother wouldn't recognize as food. Take a moment while at the store shelf to read those ingredient labels. Look for simple, whole, non-ultra processed components. Second, take some time to dig into the meanings and definitions of the various certifications. Compare their strengths and weaknesses. Find out what differentiates them. Third, visit a farm. Seek out farmers that are passionate about regenerative organic. Be sure to take special note of who's open to showing you their work and who is not. And that's the bulk of what we have other than our closing that we're still putting together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. I've heard your story before, and I think a couple times, but each time I feel like I learned something new, and gives me kind of like chills each time. Um, do we want to pause there and open it up to questions, or do you guys want to share more on any specific thing before?
Oh, we're super
Yeah.
flexible. If they're, yeah, now's a
We'd
great
be
time
happy
if
to
they're,
answer any
yeah,
questions.
either way.
Feel free.
I'll just comment and say, I thought you did a great job. For first pass with your TEDx, it's amazing. Well done, well told, very engaging, had me on the edge of my seat, and I know the story. So
Yeah.
there you go. So really, kudos there.
Well,
Thank you, Robin.
thank you. We appreciate that. You know, it's like when it's your story and you've told it 1,000 times and you've lived it, it kind of loses its luster. So
Yeah.
it's nice when it's like, really, do we have to say it again? But it seems like when we have opportunity to do that, whether we're talking to someone in a health crisis or somebody with just a food or farming question, it tends to generate a conversation somehow. And so we've ended up just with a lot of interaction with people who have said, you know, thank you for sharing because I learned something that, you know, is going to be helpful going forward. So we're always happy when that happens.
I think I have 3 questions. I'll just echo what Olivia and Robin have shared. I knew parts of your story, but found the way you all told it to be incredibly compelling. And thank you. And I appreciate, Crystal, you're like, I've told this 1,000 times, and yet it doesn't feel old in the way you're sharing it either, which is amazing.
Thank you.
So I feel like my questions are all over the map here and take whatever threads come to you. But Jody, I appreciated how you started your portion by reflecting on like who else are we blindly trusting a little bit. And I'm just curious if there have been other examples that you've uncovered there. I'll let that simmer. My second question, can I pepper them all and then you guys can figure? Okay. My second question is what you pay attention to on labels now. I feel like there's a lot to be learned from that. Like what do you actually look for when you're looking at a label? And my third question is around the national brands you mentioned. I was like, wow, like I know every single one of those. Those are like big names nationwide, maybe beyond. Sorry, I'm outdoors, obviously. But from Purely Elizabeth to Patagonia Provisions, there are others like the I can't remember now, but I knew all of them when you said it. Like, what is that experience like working with a really, that's a very different experience, I have to imagine, than like selling to your local grocery store, or to
Yeah.
you're living right next to you. So all over the map there, but thread.
Yeah, no, those are really fun questions.
Do you want to tackle the label one first? I know you have much to say on that.
Yeah. Um,
What would you say is the one thing in particular that you pay very close attention to nowadays?
organic,
Well,
right? At minimum, the organic certification and,
enriched,
oh, which has led to the grain category.
right?
Yeah. You know, here's the, when I got sick and learned so much about food, it compelled me, like, I just could not believe how better I felt. I mean, and there was a period in my life, I'm really not quite there right now, which is sort of strange considering all that we're doing, but I was a purist to the nth degree. Like, if I didn't know where it came from, if I didn't know what it was, I mean, purist even like, well, I got pregnant at one point in the time. That's really when I had hit my stride. Like, I was the kind of the cover girl in my mind, what I needed to be for like the healthiest pregnancy on the planet, right? So I rarely drank coffee, but I drank no coffee. I didn't eat sugar. Everything was whole. It was organic. It was to the extreme for 9 months. And it felt really, really good. I realize now though, that there was probably kind of like an extraneous like stress component to it, you know, like I'm growing this human, so I have to do it perfect. And that came with complications of its own, just being like that particular mindset. Like, I feel like what I've learned at the end of that whole journey up to this point is that being intentional about the food that we eat seriously matters. But we live in a society, in a nation where that has not been paramount. And in order to function in normal society, it's nearly impossible to actually live that way, especially if you ever want to eat out with friends or even over at someone else's house, right? So I've adapted. What it looks like now is it's mostly perfect at home. I mean, we're really careful about the money that we spend and where we put it. I mean, it's always whatever farms we can source from Montana first, and then we kind of branch out from there. So we do a really good job at home. And then when we're out and about and doing other things, we do as good as we can, but it's not always perfect, and that's okay. Because our wellness is primarily supported by, you know, what we are doing at home, and then also not being depleted by the stress that I was once upon a time inflicted upon myself, because there's something to say for that too. But reading labels. So when I got sick and wanted to share more, I took an online course through a holistic nutrition school called the Australasian College of Holistic Sciences or something to that degree. But anyways, it was a 6-month course, and I learned a lot about nutrients, and especially like what happens to the body when there's like a depletion of any of the minerals, especially. It was a fascinating study. But after I was armed with that knowledge, I felt a little bit more adept at teaching. And so I began teaching whole food classes just at a local level. And since then, I've joined up with one of my very best friends, who is Allison Taylor. And so some of you probably know her dad, Bob Quinn, is Allison's father of Kamut International. And as interestingly, Allison's husband is a naturopath here in Havre. And so what was happening was Jerry was getting all kinds of patients coming in who literally sometimes coming out of a Western medicine system and severely sick and not getting better and coming to him for answers. And of course, his conversation is, you got to start with food when you're well, no matter what in your wellness journey, right? But he would have these people come in who were sick, and he would try to help them. But when he would talk to them about food, they just absolutely had no idea where to start or what to do. And a lot of them, like, you know, their idea was just getting like healthier was like salad at McDonald's drive-through with their packet of who knows what's in the dressing mix, as opposed to like maybe the quarter pounder they would have got, you know? And so he's just like, in order for these changes to happen, there has to be education. They just didn't know. So we put together a series of classes. We broke it down into food groups, into grains, into herbs and spices, meats, dairy, like that, and began to talk to people. But all of that to say, we always, at the beginning of our series of classes, when our new groups would come in, we would always ask a question. And one of the first questions that we were really curious about from the perspective of the general population is, what does organic food mean to you? Like, what do you think of the organic certification or the organic label on food? Do you shop that way? Do you look for that? And we have yet to have a new person coming into one of our whole food classes who said yes. And we found out that actually the general population does not believe in that certification at all. They don't understand the difference between that certification and a call out that most foods are using, you know, like how much protein. I mean, to them, it's as simplistic as that. And they know that there's like trickery in foods. So, and in marketing, and, you know, the word natural has been completely adulterated, things like that. They know that, and they equate the organic certification to that. They think that it's just something that some companies opt to put on their packaging so that they can sell it for more money. And I was just mind blown. So we've had an opportunity to just get to share in those groups, you know, is really so much more than that. You know, it's the people who are growing food this way go through a lot to do it. They have to have inspections, and they actually have to pay for this certification. And none of this is common knowledge to the general consumer. And I know I'm speaking to the choir here. Like, I know you all would shop accordingly, but when I was just dumbfounded to find out that it was really like the popular consumer perception is really that. And so when you're trying to make a movement happen, what I have had to learn to do is really, like, I don't want to say dumb down my thinking because that just sounds rude. But you just have to think about talking to someone who has never had your life experience or never had opportunity to source or shop or know the people that are growing the things, and just really think about what their journey is like at a grocery store, and then start from scratch. Because in order for the movement to ever gain the footing that it needs to make food changes progress in the way that we all dream about, it really just has to start with literal grassroots education. And the exciting part is that when the people that we've shared with are always so thankful to hear the information. It's like they just didn't know. And we literally ended up naming one of our classes, we ended up calling it Whole Foods 101. And we had a couple different people say the only reason we came to this class is because it said 101, because we are scared to death to like look stupid in front of a group of other people, asking food questions that probably seem obvious to everyone else that's there. And so we just always, after we had been gifted with that little nugget of you know, insight from this person, we just made that part of our discussion at the beginning of every class, you know, because sometimes there were people that couldn't do the whole series, and just really explain that to them. So anyway, from the consumer perspective, I look at it grassroots level. You just have to. It's like the people who are really trying to make the change already know. We know all the things. The question is, how do we share it with people who don't? And so, yeah, but as far as looking at for personally, the word that I am hyper focused on right now is the word enriched. I think that it is paramount to the health of our nation, actually. That word essentially, I mean, just like a real quick glimpse into the history of it. The reason I'm hyper focused on it is because we own two grain-based food companies now. So we have Cream of the West, which is Montana's oldest food company dating back to 1914. And we have a new startup called GRUFF, which is an ancient grain grit company. And what makes GRUFF unique is our certification. So GRUFF is a regenerative organic company. And every single box of our grits is traceable to the farmers that grew it, which right now is us, but also Doug and Anna Crabtree Last year got their regenerative organic certification, and we're sourcing from them some crops next, and hopefully others to follow as we begin to grow. That company is really about a mission and a movement. It's we just want to share, we want to share what we're doing and why through them, as opposed to thinking about how big can we profit, or, it's not really if we can, that would be amazing. The farm needs all the support it can get, but really GRUFF is a mission. It's a mission-based food company. But this word enriched, I've had to learn because of having two whole grain companies. And the essence of this word, it's such a tricky word, because to enriched means to make something better. So when you have the word enriched written on a grain product, the average consumer literally thinks it's better, because by nature of definition, that is what it means. And really the truth is, what it means is it's been synthetically enriched with a few of the nutrients that were once in the whole berry. And that is the part that consumers do not understand. And it's the part where we've literally our health has been adulterated by an industry who just wanted to have a higher profit margin and a larger shelf life, because that is the intentional reason. One of the main, what are you going to say?
Nothing. I have something to add when you're.
Okay. When you take out the wheat has three parts to it. There's the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. The endosperm is the large part that white flour comes from. And in order to increase the shelf life, you have to strip out the bran and the germ, which is what white flour essentially is. And when you do that, you've removed all the nutrients and all of the oil. Any of the oils are like in the bran part of it. And so when you take that out, the benefit to the food industry is you can make fluffier products with an exponential shelf life, because there's nothing to go rancid. And so that was largely how this movement happened. But here's the crazy thing that I learned from a food as medicine perspective. There are a number of nutrients in the bran and the germ, like 17 or something. I've got to study up better for this talk, but there's essentially about 17 nutrients in the bran and the germ, including a multitude of B vitamins. And when you strip those things out, what happens is one of the B vitamins is actually responsible to aid in the digestion of the endosperm. So think about what we've been told as a nation and the issues people have with gluten intolerances. It's in my opinion, it is not a gluten intolerance. There are so many things happening with grain, and the reason it's a big deal is because so many people eat it on the regular, nearly every meal of the day, especially in the general consumer population. And this is the kind that they're eating, are enriched and highly processed. And so we strip out the things that are good. And then the huge crisis is what happened when they stripped it out is people started to get sick. We've got scurvy and was it rickets? I don't know. There's like a bunch of things in the 30s and 40s that were happening. They were noticing as a result of taking these things out. And so they're like, gosh, we better do something to like fix the problem. And so that is when they began actually enriching grain. And so the ingredients that they use to enrich the grain, you would think would be nutrients, but the fact of the matter is they're mostly petroleum-based substitutions for what really came out of it. So there's a problem already. But the big thing is when you take out 17 different components of a grain roughly in terms of nutrients, they're putting back 5 or 6 at the most. So when they put these things back in, the balance is completely out of whack in terms of digestibility for most people. I mean, there's a lot of guts that are stumbling over the fact that it's just synthetic and a petroleum product. And then, the fibers, nothing is in the right ratio as it is when it's a whole berry form. And I just think that the things that it ends up causing, with diabetes being at the top of the list, and then not to mention just all the gluten intolerances that people suffer from, And that's just one aspect of it. I mean, there's still the other aspect, which if it's conventional and it's bred, it's probably also, you know, wheat that has been sprayed in field. So who knows what levels of glyphosate and other things are on it, 2,4-D. And then in addition to all of that, it's, you know, if it's a processed product, it's probably got hydrogenated soybean and GMO oils mixed in also. So it's just like, it's just a messed up, adulterated category, and we can do it better. We can do it better. But again, just the grain companies is kind of where my hyper focus came from. And then just even without that, though, just the idea that so many people are eating that kind of carb on the daily is problematic. So there's a lot to share there. But that's the background there. The other parts of the question are super fun. I will share just one tiny piece, and then I'll let Jody, because we both have all kinds of things we
Hold
could
on.
share.
I just want to, this idea of the enriched flour, isn't it a super interesting parallel? I'm sure it was nobody's intention, but it's very similar to the story with the soil. Like if you think of farming practices that have been very extractive over the decades, and pretty soon there's nothing left. The organic matter is gone, the biology is gone, and so now, and all of the micronutrients are gone. But we've identified three major nutrients that we can synthetically put in: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, to get really great crops that produce big kernels with lots of endosperm. And it's like we're, you know, enriching the soil now, in the same way. It's just a really interesting parallel.
Yeah, it is. And when soil is saturated with the three main fertilizers that end up being used, same within a garden, when someone has over applied or even really applied for a long period of time, inputs like Miracle-Gro. We were educated from an incredible farmer actually in Arizona, but he comes from a region there that is actually our climate. He's in the mountains. So kind of a zone 3-4 farmer. And what he explained to us is when that happens in soil, even in a garden, what ends up happening is you can produce a tomato, but from a nutritional perspective, it's lacking, because when the ratios are upset to that degree, what really ends up occurring is the plant does not now have the ability, it cannot take up the micronutrients from the soil in the appropriate ratio. So you end up with something that looks like a tomato, and it might kind of taste like a tomato, but in terms of what it's doing for you on a wellness level, it's lacking because it's been stunted. Its ability to uptake nutrients, minerals, has been stunted by using too much of the fertilizer, which was news to us. We didn't understand that at the time. In terms to the fun part of your question, the other part on the food companies, it's been wild. Like we've just got to do and meet so many people. We currently, well, Jody can speak to the Kernza. That's its own fun thing that he has going on with that. I want to touch base with Purely Elizabeth for just a second, and then he can tell the other parts. A few years ago when we started GRUFF, you know, we're farmers and we don't know what we're doing, right? We're learning, like this has been steep learning curve, especially taking over Cream of the West. It's been really fun.
You mean we're farmers and we don't know what we're doing in the retail space?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Clear.
Yeah, to be clear. We didn't know what we're doing. I mean, we're thankful to have people working with us there that have thankfully been longtime employees and are helping us navigate it. But you just don't know all the things you don't know. So one of the things that we did is we decided to go to a food show in Las Vegas because we knew Timeless had been there. I talked to David Oyen. He had suggested going to the fancy food show. So we did that. And we had spent a week down there, and we did not show at this show, but we just went to see, like, when we show, what happens. So it was just this big learning adventure. Anyway, we'd been there for like, I don't know, close to a week, and it's just busy. There's thousands of people and booths, and it was just kind of overwhelming, but super cool. And we were on our way out, and I was walking by a booth. Jody had actually just left in an Uber. He's kind of like, I'm done. And coming behind him, and I saw this little sign, and it's like on my way out, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's Purely Elizabeth. I love their granola. And so it's like, let's just pop over and say hi. It was like five, literally, it was like 10 to 4, and the show stopped at 4. And on the final day. And so we walked around the corner, and here's Elizabeth Stein and like 4 or 5 of her people, and they were actually just cracking open a bottle of wine. And I walked up, and this guy that was in her booth came forward, and he's like, well, hey, nice to meet you. And I was like, well, we're just on our way out. We're just here scoping things out, but just wanted to stop by and say, hey, thank you for making such an incredible product. Like, we are huge fans of your granola. And he said, well, that's incredible. Where are you from? And I said, well, we're from Montana. And he said, what, really? He said, we were just talking about farmers from Montana today. He said, we were gonna, he said, we're about to source some regenerative oats from a farm family there. And I said, really? I said, well, who is it? Because I bet you we know them. And then he looks at my name tag, and he's like, oh my gosh, like it's you. And I'm like, Jody had sent a sample into an elevator, but they source from an elevator. So I had never seen Purely Elizabeth. Like, I knew he had sent oats out, but I didn't know that they were for her. And so anyway, they're just all kinds of excited. So so then he calls her over. So I meet Elizabeth, and we had this big chat, and we called Jody back from the Uber brings him, and we're all just standing there having this like little farming foodie powwow. It was super fun. And it was during that conversation that we found out, she had been a granola owner for 12 years in that business, and she had never been in an oat field. And
Wow.
I couldn't believe that, right? I mean, it's just like, again, just this other layer of it's like, I mean, she knows where to source from, and that's really all she needs to know how to do what she's doing. But she just got really excited about the opportunity. So we said, hey, come anytime. We would love to have you. And so she and 2 of her team members flew out that next summer. And so, and they spent the day with us, and it was super fun. And she's now been to an oat field. So that was cool. But yeah, there's been some interesting interactions. And you want to kind of speak to maybe Patagonia? Because that's really fun. Deschutes, like what's happening with them?
Yeah, that's where we currently are, and that's been a win. I would just, in the interest of time, like with all of those companies, for the most part, I mean, it was the inspiration for starting Gruff, because in almost every one of those occurrences, there wound up being everything from a total calamity to just really tough challenges for large corporations. And it got us to thinking, maybe we could do it in a different way from the ground level up, which was true. But now we're just, yeah, we're just learning how to navigate through the challenging world of retail sales and distribution channels and all of that. So we know a little bit now of what they're up against, but at the same time, I think we are small and nimble enough that we can. The thing that, General Mills and Annie's, they were trying to do some really cool things, but to try to keep ingredients identity preserved through their entire process, start to finish, was just astronomical for them, and not so much for us.
They knew the word regenerative was trending
Yeah.
at Annie's, which is why they wanted they wanted to do a regenerative box, a regenerative mac and cheese that was traceable. That was the goal of the whole thing. And it was literally a marketing thing because of the trends that were happening, and they wanted to be on top of it. But what that meant was, and this is like no fault of theirs, right? Because we just all live in different worlds. But what that meant for them is they sent a team of like 6 people to our farm, like a couple, 3 different times, and literally just to learn, because they knew what they were trying to accomplish, but they didn't know anything about it really. So they would come, and we would just have to have it. They were super fun actually to get to talk to, but we'd get to have these conversations with them about what it actually means to be a regenerative farmer. Like, what is it that we're trying to accomplish, and why does the soil health matter? And so it was like they had this great idea, but it was just, we're flip-flopped. They had this great idea and knew nothing about farming, and we know about farming, and we're trying to learn to navigate their world. So it all
Can I
put
jump in on there with a
Mhm.
question?
Sure.
Because I have a story in my head. I just want to check it out with you. Because so they started with a marketing agenda, which is still part of a mission for a corporate expansion, if you will. And then they come to you and they hear your mission, the health mission. And I'm just wondering how, if at all, that has shifted their focus and their mission. Is that something you can see or not yet? Or I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, they had, an entire team from marketers to, you know, that was in charge of their sustainable development. Anyways, they're all gone. They've all left General Mills now. I think it kind of all fell apart.
Oh, I see.
And then like Anheuser-Busch, a few years back on the Super Bowl, if you may have seen where had an advertisement where they were coming out with an organic beer, and they were gonna, for every 6-pack sold, they were gonna help to transition 6
Oh, yeah.
square feet of farmland to organic. So they came out with this program where they were offering not as high as an organic price, but higher than what you would normally get to grow malt barley. And so we were part of that program. I think if you were a farmer, if you were, an irrigated barley farmer in Idaho, it probably would have been okay. But in Montana, basically we got an extra 50 cents a bushel, which is great, but we had to truck it to Idaho, which ate up that 50 cents and then some.
Hmm.
Just things like that. And it's just like,
Yeah.
you could see that they're trying to project an image,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
it doesn't seem like a lot of sincerity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oftentimes it doesn't. And the thing is here is the one interesting thing though. I spoke a bit ago to the idea that consumers just don't have a lot of trust in the organic certification. What they can wrap their brains around is regenerative. They often they can't necessarily understand always what it means. It's a pretty new concept, and maybe don't even understand what the regenerative organic certification is like. But when you have opportunity to talk to them about it being a system, and about, we're ultimately, like, the one way I've learned to describe it quickly is that our food can only ever be as nutrient rich as the soil that it's grown in. Like, we eat nutritious food, but where does the nutrition come from? Well, it has to come from, like, it's only coming from the soil. It's just whatever it can uptake. And then that just resonates, it's like, oh, okay. Versus organic we don't usually get to have that same kind of conversation in organic always, even though most organic farmers that we know are doing a beautiful job of being regenerative with or without the certification. I mean, I know that certification amongst organic farmers is controversial, and I totally get it. To a lot of them, it's just what we've been doing. For us as a food company, you have to differentiate. You have to stand out, and you have to do something, because it's such a competitive market. And so that was our way of differentiating, but bigger than that was the mission, right? It's an opportunity to have a conversation that will resonate in a way that just saying we're organic just doesn't seem
There's
to
not.
do.
But the word regenerative is being hijacked faster than like, when you say
Yeah.
regenerative certification, I know that you mean ROC, but there's other certifications out there using the word regenerative. And I was just reading, have you guys seen, there was a study that Rodell just released that their data goes clear back to 1982, where they compared organic farming systems to no-till, and they used
Yeah.
and this kind of ties into your question, Aaron, about what other things, have, and I would say this is just kind of a grand nutshell version, but as I was reading through this study, that, of course, no big surprise, over 45 years, they were clearly seeing that, no-till conventional system that are now employing regenerative practices, but still relying on glyphosate, 2,4-D, paraquat, all the things. They were showing no increase in soil organic matter over a 12-year period. Things like that. And the thought that entered my mind while reading this was, I really don't know with Rodell, where all of their funding comes from. I know they're a nonprofit. But I'm fairly certain. I mean, there's no government money behind it. Therefore, there's no lobbyists behind it. And there's probably no corporations there's really no one that stands to gain from that research that's being done. And if you compare that to our nothing against our neighbors at all, but the system that everyone is a part of, it just very much seems tailored to how things were set up at the top level,
Yeah.
that all comes down the pipe from lobbyists hired by corporations because they stand to make a lot of money and anyways, that's, if I could put into a nutshell about, you know, what else is it that we've been led to believe that this is just the way it is, I think it always comes down to, uh, there's someone that stands to profit financially at the end of it.
Mhm. And that's the driver.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you know, I mean, in an ideal scene, Gruff Greens will be profitable. It's not like,
Oh, we sure want it to
right?
be. Yep,
But
I'm a photograph
it's
fan.
not your driver. You know, I mean, it is
Right,
your driver. It has to be profitable to be worth your time, but
right.
it's not, yeah.
Yeah.
The mission hat is not driven by that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'll forward an article to you. And you can share it with whoever you'd like if there's anyone interested, but it was just kind of fun. It's kind of one of the first bigger things, but we were contacted by Wellness Magazine recently. They wanted to do an article at the intersection of food as medicine with the perspective that, you know, it's not only about the workout that you do, that is going to make you healthy, but you have to be fueling with intentionally grown food. And they wanted to help people understand the regenerative concept. So it came out looking a little different than I thought it was going to, but I do think it's a good article. Anyway, I'll forward you the copy. It's going to be in their e-magazine first. It launched today.
Oh,
And it will be it should be follow-up in possibly going to their, you know, to their actual magazine later. But it's exciting that there are people wanting to more mainstream it's becoming, you know, the educational perspective of food as medicine, it seems so much more so now than when we began.
yeah, yeah, I'm sure. Wow. I have like 7 more questions, but we're also out of time. So,
I feel the same way. Well, you know, we just found out yesterday, actually,
Mm.
there's an organization maybe some of you have heard of that we work very closely with called Mad Agriculture.
oh yeah, sure.
So they're just incredible. So they've been partners of ours. And they were going to come out and do, they do a journal, actually, a Mad Ag journal a couple times a year. And last fall they came out and they actually interviewed our kids as kind of like a, you know, because we have 6 children ranging in age from 29 to 13. And so they kind of wanted to do like, what happens next? Like, what's the next generation look like and what are they doing? And so they're all kind of doing some interesting different kinds of things. And so they did this article and they were going to come out and do just kind of a celebration with it and just kind of more of an intimate thing. And I don't have any idea how that idea ended up being what it is. But anyways, what yesterday's Zoom call, Nate,
Basically,
Paul Powell was on
yeah,
it.
it's turned into a large farm tour that's involves Montana Organic Association top. Patagonia, I think, is gonna have a presence here, but there's gonna be some great conversations and panel discussions about weeds. The NRCS, the FSA are gonna be here. And we'll be doing pit analysis and yeah, our daughter is gonna be catering lunch for sure, and maybe supper too, I don't know. So
Wow.
anyways, June 17th, if anybody wants to come
Nice.
by.
It's the next generation of the Lentil Underground tour you guys did.
Yeah, I mean, really, yeah, that's there's potential. So anyway, brand new to us, and we've only got like a month to get ready, but we're excited. And I will confirm with you that date. I know my daughter was the date's going to be between the 14th and the 17th, depending on where they land with her catering. But I can let you
Of the
know that.
tour, it's the
Yeah,
17th.
oh, she was going to talk to them.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a Saturday versus a Tuesday is where it was at, right in that time frame. Anyway.
Cool. Wonderful.
Nice. That's very exciting. Um, well, we are at time, so I just want to respect your guys' time. I know you're busy, but I just want to open it up to any closing thoughts or statements from you, Jody and Crystal.
I mean, we're just thankful to have a like-minded community to
Yeah.
get to visit with. And so thank you for taking time out of your days to spend with us and especially for letting us practice our rough draft. That that was kind of an afterthought, but I'm thankful that we had opportunity to read through it. We've needed to refresh, so.
It's great.
Is Marlis on here? Is that Marlis from Snowy Mountain? Hadn't heard anything there.
I
Looks
don't
like
know.
she's in here, but
Yeah.
well, it was our pleasure really getting to hear from you guys and a sneak peek at your TEDx talk. Oh, there's Marlis. She said she's here with just computer issues. But yeah, it was our pleasure. Thank you guys so much again. It was so wonderful to hear your story again and hear your perspective on some great questions. So yeah, thanks again, you guys.
Yeah, well, thank you
you.
for what you all do. We
Yeah,
love
yeah,
Abundant. We're super
do.
thankful and yeah, for all the work that's being done. Because in order for it to go I mean, we have to work together, so.
Now, it's no longer Arrow? It's just now Abundant or, okay,
We are doing business as Abundant Montana.
okay.
As we have very clear, just as, Whole Food 101
Mhm.
gets the point across, Abundant Montana,
Yeah, I think
Agreed.
that's wise, yeah.
that
Yeah.
it, you know,
So much is just in communication. It's just
Yeah.
clear communication.
particularly, you have 3 seconds, maybe a minute of people's time.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
So hook them any way you can.
Right. Well, thank you for an hour of yours.
Yeah.
Oh, our pleasure. Truly our
Appreciate it.
pleasure. This was
Thank
so
you
much
so
work.
much.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.
Yes. And we
Thanks,
hope you
thank you.
enjoy the local food guide that will be arriving in a couple weeks.
Okay. Sounds
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
You all.
Bye.